Well, Canon has finally did it. They announced the Canon R5 and the R6. Both are full frame 4K, 8K cameras that we've been really wanting. We've been wanting full frame 4K from Canon because they have dual pixel autofocus. This is pretty exciting stuff they're offering. And the price point's not too bad either. $2,500 for the R6 and $3,900 for the R5, which is cheaper than the S1H. However, if you're just looking at the spec list just from the top, you might overlook some features that might be important to you. And especially that's why I try to think about is if the R5 was going to be an upgrade for me from my S1 or my S1H. And as I began to kind of look at some of the things that not a lot of people are talking about, begin to realize that maybe I'm better off with the S1H. So I want to give you a few things to keep in mind when looking at this camera and make sure if it is worth it for you. Because there are a few limitations with these cameras. Although they offer, autofocus, which we all really want, and no crop in 4K or 8K for that matter, it's pretty exciting. But let's talk about some of those limitations right off the bat. First thing to know is there is a recording limit. So if you go past 30 minutes, it's going to cut off and you have to restart. This sucks for long form content, interviews. You really don't want that hassle where you have to resync audio if you're trying to do that. It's not nice. So be wary, both these cameras have that 30-minute recording limit. And even if you're shooting 8K RAW, you're probably going to have maybe less of a limit. I believe they say 20 minutes before it really starts to overheat in 8K RAW, so keep that in mind. Similarly is battery life. They improved the battery, but just barely. Just a few technology boosts, but they didn't really put in a bigger battery. With the Panasonic S1 and the S1H, you get a really beefy battery, and I usually bring two, and that lasts me a whole shoot day. So I don't really have to ever worry about battery life. On these cameras, you're gonna probably have to bring a few extra batteries. So keep that in mind. You're going to have to be dealing with that. Then there's the, if you plan on doing monitoring or recording outside the camera externally, that micro HDMI is not the most secure connection. On the S1 and the S1H, they have full-size HDMIs, so it's a much more secure, much more common of a cable. These, you're going to have to be careful how you rig it. I'm sure many camera cage companies like Small Rig, maybe Condor Blue, they will come out with a way to keep that secure. I'm pretty sure they would try to do that because that micro HDMI, it can fail. So, well, I guess all things can fail, but that fails a little bit more easily. Next to keep in mind is the recording options. Compared especially to the S1H, you don't have as near as amount of recording options, different frame rates or resolutions to choose from. With the R5, you get 8K, you get 4K, and 1080. And then you get some frame rate options from 4K up to 120, 8K up to 30. But you don't really get those in-between frame rates. I believe, I have to keep in mind because I'm not sure about all the different frame rates, but they do have a variable frame rate of sorts. So I wonder if you can choose frame rates like 48 frames per second or 96, those in-between frame rates that we like to shoot at sometimes. So you don't get that on the R5, and you especially don't get it on the R6. The other thing to keep in mind is it does use H.265 as well, so that format can be really hard on computers. So you need a really beefy computer in order to play back those files. But I'm pretty sure the S1 and the S1H shoot H.265 as well. And I can play it back, but it requires a pretty beefy computer. And sometimes you can't even preview the files if you're just looking in Finder or just on the computer itself. So some of those options, you can do H.264, but it's 8-bit only, 420, so it's not nearly the same image quality. It's not as near good as files. The other thing I don't really know too much about this, but C-Log on the R6. I don't know if it actually exists on the R6. I know it does come on the R5 native, but I haven't heard anything about the R6. And that's kind of worrisome because I usually shoot always log. even for this, I'm shooting vlog. So if it doesn't come with a log profile on the R6, that can leave it to a disadvantage. Maybe for vloggers, not a huge deal, but that is something to keep in mind. A lot of other cameras have logs, so you do want to make sure. Then I picked up a few notes on from DP Review. They released a video. The Canon R6 has a slight crop in 4K. It's a 1.07, so very slight. It's still basically full frame. Keep that in mind if that's a problem. It's not too big of an issue. And the R6 also has IPB compression only, which isn't bad in and of itself. However, if you like to record the highest quality video file, all live for instance, you don't got that on the R6 at all. It's only a compressed version. Still pretty decent, still probably going to be higher quality than some Sony cameras, but yeah. And then there's some things that, again, I'm not too sure about, and they haven't really listed anything because it was just announced today, and that is dynamic range and IBIS. The dynamic range, we don't have no idea how many stops it is. Panasonic claims 14 plus stops in their vlog profile. We have no idea if it's 12, 13, 14. If they're using a pretty similar sensor, it's probably going to be close to there, 14, I would expect. But that's a different kind of feel altogether. We haven't really seen any direct comparisons yet. IBIS, I've actually heard from DP Review, is pretty comparable to the S1 and the S1H, which is awesome, really. They claim 8 stops of stabilization, 8 stops of stabilization, but that's with lenses and it's 5 internal. So if it's pretty comparable, that's all right. But again, we don't really know because Canon hasn't really made their own IBIS until now. Panasonic has quite a bit of time behind their IBIS system, so I wonder how reliable that would actually be. So the other thing to keep in mind is those video-centric tools we like. The Panasonic has really delivered on these. They give you waveforms, they give you focus peaking, they give you all those tools that you really need to compose and nail your exposure, which comes really in handy. We have no idea on the R5 or the R6 what they offer. Do they offer crop bars, previews? Do they offer anamorphic recording? Probably not. I don't know. I haven't heard anything like that. No waveforms. So those things that you kind of get used to on these other cinema cameras, or maybe if you're using the S1H, you'll kind of get used to that, but they don't offer that on the R5. At least I don't know if they do or not. The other thing to keep in mind is also there's some accessories on either camera that makes them pretty valuable on either camera system. With the Panasonic S1H, you have the XLR1 adapter, so you can plug in an external XLR mic straight into the camera, making it feel a little bit closer to like a cinema camera and a traditional video camera with those functionalities. With the R, there is no such accessory, I don't believe. But they do have that built-in ND adapter, which is really cool, and Panasonic should definitely try to work towards some sort of ND on their S1H. Because if they did that, I wouldn't ever really consider another camera. So those are some things to watch out for when you're looking at the R5 and the R6 as your potential camera. Keep in mind that, you might be accustomed to some features that might not be on the other camera. And while 8K RAW can really outshine that feature, you have to ask yourself, is it really worth it? So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to leave a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.